Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, May the 18th, and I'm back in the Reading Nook, catching a break between the rain showers. So it's actually quite bright out here, and quite warm, and of course I've got a nice hot cup of tea and another parcel to unbox. Now this one comes courtesy of Neve, so it's not mine. So I suspect that this is another title from the Johnstown Compendium, and therefore for RuneQuest. Whatever it is, let's basically thank Neve for letting me do the unboxing, because as you can tell, this hasn't been opened, and she's left it for me, which is very kind of her. She's been very supportive. So here we go. This is what we got. Life of Moonson, Book 2, the Freeform. Okay, just put that out. Okay, and pack this back up together again. Okay, so Reaching Moon Megacorp's Life of Moonson, Book 2, the Freeform, contains everything that none of the players knew before this 50-player live-action role-playing game began. All of the rules, ability cards, secret plots, and game director's notes. Witness economic devastation, sudden tragedy, military coups, the hunt for the Moonchild, and the glorious reascent of Moonson. It's written by David Hall, Kevin Jacklin, Nick Brook, and Chris Goodlow, with Michael O'Brien and Mike Hagan. Lavishly illustrated by Dario Corallo, cartography by Phil Anderson. Now this is essentially in the 90s, this team ran a huge freeform of 50 participants, and the previous books in the series, The Life of Moonson, presented essentially what was a guidebook to the city of the Lunar City, and it's basically as a tourist guide, primarily stat-free, that the players could refer to whilst playing, if necessary. And they brought it back on the Johnstown Compendium, and made that available. So that it's basically the guide to glamour, essentially presented as sort of like as a tourist guide, and that's available. So Book 2 is the freeform itself. Essentially, this is the version of what they played. It is possible to track down copies of the freeform itself, or the booklets, on eBay, but they're not cheap. They're sort of collector's items, because they're sort of like they're 20 years old, so on. But here, what we have is essentially a separate game set in Glorantha, which you can essentially take and organise for your friends and their friends and their friends, and then you've got 50 people, as long as they're fans of Glorantha. I have played in LARPs of that size at conventions, in particular Vampire LARPs, in the past, and this is a sort of similar thing, where you have multiple participants, each with their own essentially objectives and motivations, and you have basically everything here to do that. So the first thing you need to say says it's okay. This is not RuneQuest, okay? This doesn't use RuneQuest rules, and it's probably oversimplified in places. But essentially, that's because it's not dealing with a tabletop simulation. It's dealing with people talking to each other. You know, there is no physical contact. There is no physical contact. There is no physical conflict. It's all social conflict. So. And it's designed essentially. They design it essentially as general, basically as a piece of interactive literature, that you're exploring this setting together in a group, and you have people who things going on, and on one side of the event, and you may not be aware of it because you're enmeshed in your own plots and the plots of the people immediately connected to you. And building a LARP like that takes skill and time, because essentially you have to introduce multiple plots, tie the characters to the plots and each other, and basically keep everyone involved and motivated. So what to do, it says here, ham it up and chew the scenery, talk to people, settle disputes in a friendly manner. If you have a problem, see a director. And again, with a LARP that size, you will need multiple directors or referees. You have essentially the rules for handling that, making challenges, and basically they say, again, the characters in Life of Moonson tend to eschew physical violence in favour of political one-upmanship. For those who simply have to resolve a dispute by coming to blows, the unglamorous gladiators event has been formalised to take care of their excess energy. Essentially, if there's physical if there's physical conflict within the story, not the event itself, well then essentially what they're doing is essentially they're doing it by proxy. And that's perfectly fitting if essentially what you have is a meeting of the high and mighty of a city. Again, there is there's basically almost a cast book available for this, and you'll see the artwork in the previous book for this series, which I believe I've got. It's Life of Moonson, Book 1, The Characters. That, and basically that repeats some of the artwork from that, and that's no problem because essentially it's great artwork. And one of the fantastic things is you're going through this and you're going, which actor does this look like? So there we go. You've probably got that's Vincent Price, for example. And essentially this event is designed, in effect, it's so large, it's so long, it's designed to take a little under 12 hours. Essentially run from 11 o'clock in the morning with the pre-game, start at 1 o'clock and go through to 10 o'clock at night. So we are talking 9 hours for this. And again, still using the same great artwork. And I don't have a problem with them repeating artwork because it's good. Patrick Stewart, Toby Jones, sorry. And so on. It's taking you through the events, it's talking through like taxation and the economy, the background to the 7-year plan. It's all the setup for this, and it's probably one of the sort of like the more complex, I would suggest, LARPs set up like that. It's incredibly ambitious, and I mean, especially when we're going through, you have a discussion here of the Presidium and what that is in the Lunar Empire, which right now is not available in terms of the background of the setting to Glorantha, because there is no lunar source book that's actually available from Cosium at the moment. So we have a discussion of the lunar government in theory and practice. So also, that's basically, you have more information than the actual game is giving you. This isn't necessarily official, but it falls under your Glorantha may vary. And then, you have events such as throughout the day, the regimental games, the New Year games, the Senate in session, and what will happen then. For example, they will be attended by Tom Hanks. And it's really great artwork, all fitting, and so on. So much information in here. And then we come on to the Red Emperor's Orgy. The question is, who attends the orgy? When does it take place? What happens? And so on. How do the games work? Here we go. It's there. I mean, essentially, obviously, that's going to be played out essentially as a narrative more than anything else because of the nature of what it is. And then you have a turning event, tragedy. Monsoon Argenteus dies towards the end of the orgy, and then you have the choice of choosing a new emperor. So this is heavily plotted as an event. Normally when you do a LARP, there will be events thrown in kind of, I mean, some do, some don't. This one does. Most of them, but basically a lot of them just play around with just focusing on the plots of each character, and that keeps them occupied throughout, with the referee sort of standing off as just to step in when there's an issue, or and so on. This is a bit more. Yeah, essentially, this is essentially about the death of the last death of one emperor and the birth of another, and see what happens. And again, yeah, more games, a chariot race, a gladiatorial games, and here are the gladiators. Again, great artwork, and again, you kind of fit in them. Which one of those are played by which actor? And that's a really fantastic touch, because it's sort of like it brings the characters to life, and you've even got a Red Goddess's hero quest in there, and here are the participants. Again, more actors you can essentially choose to apply if you want to. So yeah, so I mean, there's so much in here. This is so much information. You know, elements such as you've got plots like the East Isles bubble crisis, which is fantastic, because essentially, you know, you have the South, you have sort of like one of the biggest financial disasters of the 18th century, the South Sea bubble, which bringing something like that into play is always fun. And things like, you know, the invasion of the West, one of the icebreakers is missing, Sartar Gate, you know, whether or not that's you know, another scandal, and so on. And you're going through, and you've essentially you have challenge cards, yeah, all the way through. So, you know, what you've got here is really a piece of history, and it's a piece of history in terms of how the background of Glorantha was envisioned and developed outside of the game's own developers. So outside of what basically Greg Stafford was writing. So this is this is all primarily fan-driven and fan-written. But it still fits the setting, because they understand the setting, and they're doing something interesting with it, and they're taking it forward. So you could actually just it's unlike in this fashion that you would bring it to the table as your tabletop game. You might be inspired by elements of it, but not necessarily by the events of this single day, where you have the death of you know, basically the mask of the moon, the emperor, and then you know, the accession of another. So you, in a sense, you have a history of Running Quest as a game, and then you have a history of an event within the background that, or at least a one take upon that history. You know, we won't know until perhaps when when we see an actual official content for the Lunar Empire from Chaosium themselves. So this is a fantastic book. I you know, if you are at all interested in Running Quest and Glorantha and its history, this nicely captures its flavour and feel, and you know, and how the fans approached it. And I love this. You have Murad Isnik, the Red Admiral, okay, and look who's playing it. You know, like Sean Connery a la Hunt for Red October, which is a lovely touch. You know, there's so much flavour in just that kind of casting. So yeah, you have said a piece of history. This is so yeah, Life of Moonson, Book 2, the Freeform. This is a piece of history as Glorantha was played and envisioned, and it's a take upon an event within the history of Glorantha as a setting in the Lunar Empire. I will get a copy of this at some point. I will review it. I've got to access the first book and review that at some point as well. In the meantime, if you have enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook, please do take the time to click the like button down below. And if you have any comments or feedback, I appreciate those as well. Take the time to read those. And lastly, of course, if you want to be informed of yet more unboxings in the Nook and watch me open up a package, pull out the contents, talk about it to the best of my ability and my knowledge, and share a nice hot cup of tea, then please do subscribe. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon with another unboxing in the Nook.